Hey Terraformers, welcome back. We are going to now implement the CDN in front of it to be able to see our website, which is going to then get hooked up to TerraTowns. So what we'll do is maybe we'll first ask ChatGPT if it can write us how we can do that. So static website hosting, or we'll say AWS CloudFront serving static website hosting for an S3 bucket. Okay, and let's see what it generates out. Because I just want to point out if it's doing something that's not great. And so we'll just see what it generates out. So it's creating that S3 bucket, that's fine. It's creating the website, we know that's old. It's creating a bucket policy, that is definitely something that we would be using for sure, yep. And already I can see a problem. And I mean, it's not a problem, you can definitely do it this way, but it's using origin access identity. So AWS has a newer way of doing it, which is origin access controls. Origin access controls, AWS, CloudFront. We'll go over here. And so now this is a more secure, easier way to do it. It came out from this time last year. And because this is trained on 2021 data set, it's never going to know about this. And this can be very frustrating because it's a pain to configure CloudFront, and CloudFront also takes forever to spin up, right? So we really want to make sure that we get our configurations correct for this one. So I just wanted to point out that issue if you're going to copy and paste it. So yes, it can write a lot of Terraform, but not necessarily most up to date and not necessarily best practice. It varies based on provider and other things, so just consider that. But what we'll do is we'll go over to the AWS documentation, and I know that we need CloudFront, so we're going to need definitely a CloudFront distribution. So I'm going to type in CloudFront, and we're going to go down here on the left-hand side. Oh, we'll type in distribution. And it's not like I know exactly the name of this. I just know that CloudFront calls them distributions, and so I just start typing that in, and that's how I figured it out. So they have an example here. I mean, this is showing data, which is not what we exactly want, but we'll go down below. Use this data source to retrieve information. Oh, we're looking at data sources, sorry. And that's something we should cover at some point, is this data thing. But we'll get to that at some point here, okay? CloudFront distribution over here. CloudFront distributions take about 50 minutes to reach a deployed state. After creation or modification during this time, deletes to resources will be blocked. If you need to delete a distribution that is enabled and you do not want to wait, you can use the retain on delete flag. And that might be something that we might want to do because it is quite the headache to wait for this distributions. And we might end up using that data flag as a way to reference existing infrastructure, not import, but to reference existing infrastructure to make our lives a little bit easier. But we'll see how that goes. So down below, we have an example for an S3, for the S3 origin to CloudFront. I just want to see if that looks right there. And this looks pretty decent to me. So what I'm going to do is start copying this out. But notice there's a lot of code. There's a lot of code to copy here. And our main TF is kind of getting long. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to break up those files, as we talked about before in the nested modules, to make our lives a little bit easier. So I'm going to go over to issues here. We're going to create a new issue. And I'm going to type in, this will be CloudFront, or we'll say CDN implementation, CDN, or Content Delivery Network, yep. And we'll create that. And so we want to set up a few things here. We want to set up a CloudFront distribution. We want to set up a CloudFront access origin or control, origin access controls. Okay, we want to also set up a bucket policy. Okay, and that should be enough for now. I'm sure there'll be things in between here, but those are the three things we're going to focus on. I'm going to create this new branch. Okay, we're going to go over to our code. We're going to check out this new branch down below. It says CDN implementation. Yeah, that's right. I keep thinking CFN, CloudFormation, CFN. Yeah, so CDN is Cloud Delivery Network. That's correct. We're going to go ahead and hit the Gitpod button here. We're going to launch our new Gitpod environment. And we'll give it a moment to spin up. I'll see you back here in a second, okay? All right, so our environment is up. And we're going to go over to the modules on the right-hand side. I'm just going to pump things up here a bit so we can see what we are looking at. Whoops, I'm squashing my head quite bad there. And what we want to do is make a new file in here. I'm going to call this resource-cdn.tf. Whoops. Resource-cdn.tf. And we'll have resource, I'm going to say storage TF. I'm keeping these kind of generic. And, you know, for modules, there's all kinds of opinions on how to organize these things. I just want to do it this way. The reason I put resource in front of them is so that when this is alphabetical, they're going to group all the resources together. That's the reason why I did it that way. What I want to do is go over to the main TF. We're going to leave the providers here. I want to grab all the other stuff that is specific to storage, and we're going to cut that out, and we're going to go over to storage, and we're going to paste that on in here. We'll say allow, and so that is now pasted on over here. We're going to go over to CDN, and we're going to grab the code that we saw in the documentation. There's a lot more going on here. We probably don't need all of this. We'll grab some of this. Okay, we need this for sure. We'll paste it in. Okay, there's a lot going on there, more than I probably want. But while we're here, we should also grab the URL. So that is, oh, we just had it open. Where'd it go? Here it is. And we'll just paste that on above here, just in case we need to reference it again. If you need to click through it easily, you hold Control and click that, okay? But I'm going to just take a look here because there is a lot of configuration going on here. And we do want to use origin access control because that's the newer way to do it. This one is using the regional domain name for our bucket, which makes sense. Our bucket is actually called, I think, website bucket. And notice that this one's called default. And we'll talk about that here in a moment because that's a really great idea. We want to enable the distribution. We want to have IPv6 enabled for sure. We can have a comment here. I think that shows up. It's like the only way we can see which distribution we have. So we definitely want to set that. Hosting for, I'm going to just say var, yeah, hosting for something in particular. So here, this would be the bucket name. Okay. And we have our default root object, so that is good. Do we want to have logging? No, we don't need logging. And do we need aliases? We're not going to use it, but that's something that you would commonly do if we were going to put a custom domain on this. We are not necessarily putting a custom domain on here, so we don't need to do that. We have a lot of options here for the cache. We don't really need post, put, and patch, but just in case we do, we'll leave those in. The target here is local S3 origin ID, and we'll go down below here. Forward query string false. That's true. We don't want to pass the query string along. We're not going to forward any cookies right now. The policy for allow all is good. This is all looking good to me. And then down below we have all these caching behaviors. So there's ordered caching behaviors. There should be like a default one in here. And so that's what we're going to want. So there should be a default one. Yeah, here it is. So these are if we want to do different things. So we don't need this one. We don't need this one. Okay, this is just kind of if you want to do extra kind of caching. And then we have our price class. This is going to determine the cost of using CloudFront. We should be able to stay into free tier, no problem here, because we're not doing anything crazy, but you can say how much level of replication you want in different areas. We need to specify any geo restrictions. And whitelist is the word they use. It's not my choice. It is just what it's set there. So I'm just pointing that out, that that's AWS's legacy terms there. But we do need to set geo restrictions. the block, and I'm just going to say none here. For locations, we'll set none because we don't want to really restrict this to any place. But if we had this set, we could say we don't want to show this in Canada or US or India or whatever country. We're going to show it to everywhere. We have tags here down below. We don't need to set any, so I'll take those off. Actually, you know what? I'll set our user UUID on there just because we did it for the other one. So we'll say var user UUID. Viewer certificate, we're going to let CloudFront serve up certificates for us so we have HTTPS for free and we don't have to make our own or figure that out. So this isn't going to work just alone with this because it expects this access origin and it also expects this local S3 origin ID. So what local is, it's a way of you embedding some local variables if you want to use them. We don't need to use it this way. We could pass it over as a environment variable, but this is a good example of using local for something. And I'm just going to say my S3 origin. That's the same thing that they do in the other one. So if you ever have a use case where you need to just have some local variables, you can use that, okay? It's as simple as that. There's not much to say about it. But we also have to have this origin access control. Let's go back to the code and see if they have one. So we'll go here. And are we seeing a origin access control? No, I do not see one. So what we'll do is we'll look that up here. It's an incomplete documentation. That's okay. Origin access control. So there it is. And here we have an example. I'm going to go ahead and copy this one. I'm going to just tell you, I don't even know it that well. Like, when I was doing this project, I realized that this was a new feature, and so I added it in. But I don't know all the flags and options for this stuff because cloud is always changing. So what did I do for this one? So we need to set up a name for the origin access control. So I'm going to just say OAC, and then I'm just going to do interpolation here to inject our bucket name. I kind of wish we called this something else than bucket name, like slug or some kind of generic identifier. But we'll leave it as bucket name for the time being. And we'll just describe what this is. This is going to be origin access controls for static website hosting. And we'll do this, say var bucket name. The origin is S3, that is true. The signing behavior will be always, and then we'll have the signing protocol SIGV4. Do I know what all that means? No, I know this means it's going to point to S3. This means the protocol it's going to use, and the behavior is always to always sign. It's probably in that article that we saw earlier in the video where we were talking about what it was. We could link that if we want. So it's this one here. So I'll just put that in here. If you want to read it, you can. I'm not that interested in reading it. I have a hang on how to use this. So that is set down below there. So that looks good. The only thing that's missing is our bucket policy. Without a bucket policy, this isn't going to work. Okay? So what we'll do is we'll go over to storage, and we're going to need to add a bucket policy. So this one's a little bit tricky. I'm just going to go and look at my example to how I did it. And so we'll go over to here, and we'll type in bucket policy. Okay? And again, I'm just going to tell you that it was very, very hard for me to find the origin access control policy. And so I had to do a lot of work to get it. And I don't feel like walking us through on how to do that. I'd rather just provide it to us. Well, we can try. So we can just say here, maybe it's in this article. I think that might be the policy. Let's see here. That might be it. So what we'll do is we will create our bucket policy. So we'll go over to the docs here and just looking here, bucket policy. I'm just checking if that looks right. Bucket policy. Yeah, it does. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll copy this. We'll paste this in. And so here I'm just going to say bucket policy. Yep, okay, and we're in storage because we're working on something that's with storage. And for this, we want to reference our buckets. We'll say bucket, or that'll be website bucket, bucket name. And actually for our origin access control, we named this example. That's not going to be right because this one has to be called default. Now, this is what I was going to say earlier in the bootcamp, was that if you're just using one of something, we can just name all of these default, right? And then that way it makes things a lot easier to manage your code and not have to worry about what all the names are. We might go back later on and rename them all as default. For now, we're just going to work with what it is. But that is just one way that you can name stuff instead of giving them all unique names, unless there is a good reason to give them unique names beyond the default one. But anyway, coming back over to here, so we specify our bucket, and now we need to specify the policy. So if we go up and check this, here it says a text of the policy. Although this is a bucket policy rather than an IAM policy, the data source may be used as long as, etc., etc. So we need to provide the bucket policy here, right? And so this is, they're just referencing it. They're just referencing JSON data. And I suppose that is the way that we can do it. Maybe we'll do it both ways here. The first way is we can just use I'm just going to comment this out, but we can go policy here and we can just say JSON encode, and then we can literally write JSON right here. And that's really convenient. So what we'll do is we'll go back over to this, which supposedly has the bucket policy. I'm just going to double check to see if it's correct. SID, CloudFront. It looks right to me. So I'm going to copy this one. And we're going to bring this on over here. I'm going to paste this in here. And we can't exactly use, I don't think we can exactly use JSON here. We'll have to play with this a little bit. So the first thing is we'll do this and we'll make this into an equals. Okay. I know this looks silly, but it's just how the underlying language HCL works. And you know what? We've been doing this whole bootcamp and I haven't talked about HCL at all. So HCL is the underlying syntax that is used by Terraform. It's what makes the language it. And so if you use other tools and it looks like you're writing Terraform, it's probably they're just sharing the HCL syntax, which is like a proto or base language for this language, okay? But let's just continue on with this. So we need a statement. This SID is fine. I'm just going to go, and we only really need one statement here. I don't need multiples. So I'm going to just take this out here. And we'll take that out. Just going to fix this indentation here. And so we do want a SID. That is good. We want an effect for sure. The principal, the person that's going to be able to access it or service, will be CloudFront. That is right. We want to have a get object. That is correct. Where we want to change is our bucket here. So this, we're going to use interpolation like that, and we'll just put an AWS S3 bucket, website bucket. I'm not sure why it's not auto-completing for us. .id. We could also write bucket. I think ID and bucket resolves the same thing. I'm going to choose ID here. Is there any conditions? Yes, there are. We need to restrict this to a specific distribution or account, I suppose. So here, notice that it's asking for an account ID. Okay, so this is actually a good example of using data. So data is a way of importing things into Terraform. What we'll do is we'll go up to our journal and write this in week 1. So we'll say Terraform data sources, and we'll go look this up. Terraform data sources. Here we go. And we'll go back over here. Just say data sources, and we'll check this out. So a data source is accessed via a special kind of resource known as data sources, resources, declared using the data block, which is here. A data block requests the Terraform read from a given data source, so a source being your AWS account, and export the result under the given local name example. So here they're saying there's an Amazon machine image. We're going to call it example, And this is the properties to which we're going to select it. So they're saying filter out the AMI based on these tags and get that stuff. Okay, so that is a way we can get the data source. If we go over to the documentation, so just say Terraform providers, I think it will list out all the data sources. Go to documentation here. So this is provider. I want data sources. So let's go over, let's see, data sources. Show me that here. Here we go, data sources. And so here's a bunch of data sources we can use. There's probably more than this. These are metadata sources, whatever that means. But we want to get the, over in our code here, we want to grab this account ID. And so we can use the AWS caller identity to do that. And that's what I'm looking for here. So I don't see it here, but I'm gonna just type it in, AWS caller. There it is. It's a bit hard to find the data sources because they're always under whatever category they are. But see here, we have a data source, and this will allow us to get the account ID. If you remember, we used this earlier as a way to validate our AWS account, remember? So if we type in this, AWS, we'll type clear here, AWS STS get caller identity, it returns that payload and it gets our user ID, our account ID, and our ARN. And so using this, we can go grab the account ID here, right? Data, AWS caller identity, account ID. So that's something we're going to need to specify somewhere in our account. We can put that, I'm just trying to decide where I placed it last time. Maybe I put in my main file here. I did, because I didn't know where to exactly put this. But what we'll do is go over to main, and we'll grab this link here for data sources. Or not this one, we'll grab this one, and we'll paste this here. And what we'll want to do is just say data, AWS, caller, identity, and we'll do parentheses, current, and then curlies, because that's all it takes. And so now we can reference that other places. So notice over here, we can do data, AWS caller ID, and then get the account ID. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So go back to our code into our bucket policy. That's where we're doing this. And then we can just take this out here and paste that in. And that's going to get us that. But we still need this distribution ID. So that is something we need to still figure out. Yeah, so that's fine. But what we'll do here is figure that out next. We can just reference it however we need to. So if we go split this here, whoops. And if we go to CDN, it should be somewhere here. So we go over here, we'll do interpolation, AWS, CloudFront, distribution. It's not auto-completing because we're in another file, right? So I'm not sure if it can figure that out across a file. And then we'll just do this. And we'll click through this link. I'm holding control, and we'll look at the resource or the reference here. And what I'm looking for under attribute reference is getting the ID, which apparently is just ID. So that's perfect. And we'll just say ID. It seems like we could have got the source ARN as well. So we could have also probably just done this. We could have just wrote ARN instead. I'm going to just show that optionally, but we're not actually going to do it because I want an excuse to use the data field. So what we could have done instead is we could have just done this. Okay. And as you can see, that is a lot cleaner. But I'm going to stick with this one because I want an excuse to use this get caller ID, okay? And so yeah, we'll continue on with the formatting here. I think that these, let me see if these have to be equals. Let me double check here. Storage. Yes, they do. Okay. Again, this is just because we're using HCL. At least that's what I'm aware of. Though I can't remember, maybe maybe Terraform allows you to do colon or equals. I kind of remember maybe it supports both. It probably does. We probably don't have to make those all equals, but I'm going to do it because I did it in my other code base and I just want it to work, okay? So that looks good. And so that is one way we're going to be able to set the policy. And so what I want to do here, I'm just going to take that off there, is I think we have everything we need for this to work. So we'll go ahead and we'll type in Terraform apply or Terraform plan. Oops. And the reason this isn't working is we have some kind of change. And so it wants us to do Terraform init. Oh, you know what? It's because we did it up here. Terraform apply, that's probably why. Terraform plan. Nope, we need to do a Terraform init. And it has a problem with the local argument, unsupported argument. An argument named local is not expected here. TF init. Okay, so what is our problem? Let's go back and check. So we go over here. That shouldn't be a problem. That looks fine to me. Unless I made a syntax error. Let me double check. Oh, you know what it is? There's not an equal on here. Let's do Terraform plan. And so here it seems like it's saying that it needs an update maybe for that local. Required plugins are not installed. Okay, well, let's just do that then. And it still has a problem with its blocks of local are not expected here. Did you mean locals? Yes, I did. Okay, and we're going to init that. So we don't forget, we're going to go put that in our documentation really quickly. Go down below. Terraform data sources, Terraform locals. This allows us to source data from cloud resources. This is useful when we want to reference cloud resources without importing them. Okay, and we'll give an example for this. So this could be going over here. That could be this as one particular example. TF for Terraform. And then we'll look up locals, Terraform, local values, I guess. That's what it's called. And we'll go over here and we'll just put that link there. So we'll just say local values. And we'll paste that in. There we go. So yeah, it's just a way for us to reference local variables. Sometimes it's because we need to do like a manipulation of things. So we might use locals when we need to format something into a final format. But you know, we're using it in the most simplest use case. We're not going to get into more complex ones here. This is good enough for now. That'd be more for the intermediate bootcamp that we would do that, okay? So yeah, those look fine there. We'll go back over here and let's check out how our plan did and let's see if it worked. I think we were just initializing, right? Yeah, so now we can do a plan and see if that works. Unsupported attribute. This object has no argument, nested block, or exported attribute name on line 43 for resource storage. So we'll go to our storage file. We'll go to line 43. And maybe it's just called bucket here. Sorry, bucket, that's why. And we'll hit up, and we'll try that again. Cannot include the given value in a string template, string required. Okay, so there's some formatting issue on that, and that is in our CDN here. So that is in this file on line 58. Or actually, no, it's part of the bucket policy, I think. Yeah, so we'll go here. And so it has an issue with this line. So cannot include the given value in a string template. String required in a string template. So there must be, yeah, so the issue here is this is supposed to be .id here on the end, like that. There we go, and that was probably our problem. We'll go ahead and hit up. Again, you can see how this could be a lot easier or better to use, but, you know, just want to use data for something here. And so it looks like things are good. We have 7 to add, 0 to change. So we'll go ahead and say apply, auto approve. And if this works correctly, then we are going to have a site that is served up, if we're lucky, right? Because this stuff is a bit tricky. The distribution does take quite a bit of time to spin up, so we need to be very patient here. But anyway, that's going to spin up. While that is going, let's go take a look at this other call here. We could have done data AWS IAM policy document, allow access from another account. So this here is if the policy already existed on AWS, right? So this isn't referencing a local file. This is referencing a data source, just like how this, that other one here is referencing that API call, which is data on the server. So if we really wanted to use this, we'd actually have to go and create that policy on AWS to reference it, if that makes sense. We could have probably also created a policy resource here and then referenced it indirectly as well. But I'd rather just do it inline for this one. Well, actually, we wouldn't be able to reference another policy, I don't think, because... Oh, no, we could, because we could get the JSON from it, so we could. But anyway, this is going to take a bit of time, so I'll see you back here in a bit when this is done, okay? All right, so that is created. It didn't take 15 minutes, but it did take a bit of time, 3 minutes here. Let's go take a look here. But distributions are really slow to make, so you know, I'm not always 100% sure I trust it when it says that. So what we'll do is make our way over to our AWS account. And we'll go over here. And we're going to go over to CloudFront. So we'll type that up here in the top. And we'll double check to make sure it's even done. So here, what we'll do is scroll to the right. And it says it's enabled, so it must be done. So that's really good. So if we want to know if this works, we can copy this distribution domain name, paste it in the browser, and hopefully our website works. But notice it did work, but it downloaded the file. What the heck? So why did it do that? And so that is a little bit of a mystery, but I know why it's doing that. So the reason it's doing that is that when we uploaded our files to S3, it doesn't actually know the content type of the files. It just thinks that there's just like no content type. So if we specify the content type, that should fix that issue there. So let's go ahead and see if we can do that. I'm just looking for the reference. We'll just click through here and get it from here. So if we go here, we should be able to specify the content type. Here, yeah, content type. And so that is what we need to place in there. So we'll go down and we'll just say content type. And it should be text HTML or something like that. Let me just double check what it's supposed to be, just so I don't make a mistake here. I'm just checking off screen here. If it ever decides to load. Okay, 1 second here. I'll be back in a moment, okay? Sorry, I'm back. Yeah, so it's what I thought. It's text HTML, and so that will give us the content type there. Okay, and we'll go down below here. And I don't know if it's going to trigger the changes based on that content type. It might, but we'll take a look and see what happens. Go all the way down below. We'll say Terraform apply and see if it picks up, because that is a attribute it should be able to track, is that the content type is different. And it does, so that's great. So we're going to say yes, and that should push out those changes. And so those have now been uploaded. So let's go take a look and see if that is fixed. Okay, so we'll go back over to here. We're going to copy that address. We're going to paste that in. And notice that it's still downloading the files. Why is it doing it? We changed the content type and we specified it. The reason why is that the way CloudFront works, it is a content delivery network. It caches values. You have to clear the cache for that to work, for it to take notice of new changes. So we'll go here, sorry, not behavior. We'll go to invalidations and we're going to do / asterisk and hit clear invalidations. And that's going to clear the cache of those files. And so now when we go to that address, when it finishes this invalidation, we should be able to serve it as opposed to downloading the file. So we'll give it a moment there. It shouldn't take too long, but I'll be back here when this is done, okay? All right, so we had to wait a little while for that. Not too long, but the cache is cleared. Now let's go check and see if we're having less of an issue here. Okay, it's still downloading it. It's still downloading it. So if we go back to here, it changed the text type. So it really shouldn't be serving those anymore. Okay. Give me a second to figure this out, all right? You know what? I just don't trust... I don't trust the bucket to actually clear those. I know we updated the content type, but I think maybe it may have not actually cleared those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. It's going to put it out of... it's going to cause configuration drift, which is totally fine. And then we'll tell it to re-upload those files and see if that fixes the issue. So we'll type in clear here. Oops, clear. And we will do another apply. And we just want to see that it's going to upload those files. Now the other thing might be is that they're not valid HTML files. So that could also be the issue. Maybe just to save us some trouble, we should probably just fix those really quickly. So we'll go ask ChatGPT. So just write a valid HTML file with a heading. I don't feel like looking it up, so we'll give it a moment here. There we go. That's what I want. So I'll go copy that. We'll go into our public directory here. And I'm going to go here. And we will update this. This will say, hello, Terraformers. And I'm going to copy this. We'll go back over here. And we'll just go and say error found. Error. And here this will be error. Okay, so that is now set up there. I'm going to type in clear. And we're going to do a Terraform apply and see that it notices the changes. Give it a moment here. We'll say yes. And it's uploaded those two files. We're going to have to go over to CloudFront and manually clear the, or run the invalidations. And so this is something that we're going to have to solve because it's going to get really tiresome doing this. We want it so that if files have changed or we deliberately want them to change for it to happen, okay? So we'll just wait here for this to finish and then we'll check again to see if it's doing what we want it to do, okay? All right, so that invalidation is done. Let's go see if it actually is serving it up, or I'm going to go crazy if it doesn't. We'll go here, and there we go. So it could have been that it wasn't valid HTML, but definitely those content types played a role in there. And so now we have that there. Now, the thing is we might want to retain the CloudFront distribution because it's such a pain to spin up and spin down. It really depends if we're going to be making many more changes to it. It is also a great opportunity if we want to see that retention. So maybe we'll take a look here. Worst case, we might just end up tearing it down, but we'll go look at the CloudFront distribution and look at the recommendations. So they have a retain on delete flag. So it says CloudFront distributions take about 50 minutes to deploy. If you need to delete a distribution that is enabled and you do not want to wait, you need to use the retain on delete flag. During this time, deletes to resources will be blocked. If you need to delete a distribution that is enabled, you do not want to wait, you need to use the retain on delete flag. I don't know if we really need to use that right now, but disables the distribution instead of deleting it when destroying the resource through Terraform. If this is set, the distribution needs to be deleted manually afterwards and default as false. So yeah, maybe we will use that. I don't know. Let's just delete it for the first time and see how painful it is. And then make a decision after that, okay? So I'm going to go here and type in destroy. I'm going to just say auto approve because I really want to tear it all down. But what we need to tackle in the next video will be invalidating the cache when we actually want it to invalidate. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take, but while we're waiting, let's be productive and go over here and look at our documentation. So we did Terraform data sources, Terraform locals. Locals allow us to define local variables. It can be very useful when we need to transform data into another format and have it referenced as a variable. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I would describe it. We have our data sources. What else? What else did we do? We have the JSON encode, which is kind of nice. So I like that. Go back over here. Say working with JSON. And we'll just look this up in Terraform. Encodes a given value to a string using JSON syntax. Okay. And we'll go over here. And that's good enough here. We use the JSON encode to create the JSON policy inline in the HCL. This way we can avoid having to, I think that's basically the way we'd have to do it anyway. There's no way to avoid it. But yeah, it seems like this is going to take a bit of time because it does take a long time to destroy clusters, or sorry, distributions. But I guess that disable flag would speed it up, but that's not really good if we need to re-enable it, and I'm not really sure if that's easy to do. But we could find out next time, okay? But I'll just wait here till it's done. All right, so that's all teared down there. Took a little bit of time. Does it say how long? About 4 or 5 minutes, so not that bad, but what we'll do is we'll go ahead and commit our work here. We'll say 29, so create CDN and serve S3 bucket from CDN. Okay, and the great thing was we didn't even have to open up the policy access or block access from S3. That's something that I always kind of muck up and I end up opening up anyway, but it's nice that we didn't have to do it because we got it done the right way with origin access controls. So that is now being committed. We're going to go over to here. We'll pull our pull request. We'll make a new pull request. We will drop down to our latest branch. We will go and create that new pull request. We'll create that pull request. We will squash down our merges once it confirms everything is okay. And now we are ready to go back to main. So we'll go git checkout main. Remember this time to pull, because if we don't pull, when we tag, it's going to be on the wrong thing. What are we tagging with? We'll go check our code here onto the right-hand side. We are on git tag 1.50 git push tags. Okay, and so now we have 1.50. I don't trust this thoroughly, so I'm going to just double check here, and everything looks fine here. So we are in good shape. We will see you in the next one. We need to figure out that distribution so that it invalidates. And so that's what we'll be doing in the next video. So there's some fun things in there, but we'll see you soon, okay? Ciao.